Good morning, everyone. My name is John Heerdig, and welcome to our Tribe Public CEO presentation titled, Is the Beaten Down Biotech Sector the Smartest Bet in Today's Volatile Market? Which will be co-hosted by Stephen Ledger, CEO of Serina Therapeutics, NYSE, under the symbol SER. Serina Therapeutics is a clinical stage biotechnology company developing a pipeline of wholly owned drug product candidates to treat neurological diseases and other indications. Serina's POZ platform, that's POZ, provides the potential to improve the integrated efficacy and safety profile of multiple modalities, including small molecules, RNA-based therapeutics, and antibody-based drug conjugates, ADCs. Serina is headquartered in Huntsville, Alabama, on the campus of the Hudson Alpha Institute of Biotechnology. Their website is serinatherapeutics.com. As many of you know, I'm the managing member of Tribe Public. Our website is tribepublic.com. Members from 31 plus countries in all 50 states have joined Tribe Public freely to gain direct corporate access to leaders and experts they care about via webinars, events, and via 36 venue sites located across the U.S. Over in-person luncheons, dinners, and speaking engagements with local tribe members. Tribe members, furthermore, are invited to submit names of experts and leaders of industry via our free wish list process at our website, adding names of companies and experts that they would like to meet to learn more. Please note that I'm also the managing director of Vista Partners, LLC, a registered investment advisory firm in California, and its website is Vista P Global. Please review both sets of disclaimers at each site and know that I'm currently a shareholder and an advisor to Serina Therapeutics. I'd also like to thank you all for participating and for all of your questions that you've already submitted, and remind all of you that you may send in more questions via the Zoom chat feature during this event. A video of this event will also be published at our Tribe Public YouTube channel and be sent out to all post this event via the Tribe This Week, our weekly e-newsletter that goes out at the end of each week. Thank you to Stephen Ledger and to Serina Therapeutics for joining us today. Now let's get started. Hi, Stephen. Could you actually please start and tell us a little bit about yourself prior to beginning your presentation?
Thanks, John, for inviting me to co-host on this topic, and thanks everybody for being here this morning. I'm probably more qualified to weigh in on this subject than I am on the challenges of building a biotech company in this environment. And I'm going to attempt to tie both of those together to give investors on the call a few data points to look for in your research. Very briefly on my background, prior to my involvement with Serina, I spent 3+ decades as a growth investor, starting at Fidelity Investments as an equity analyst and portfolio manager in the 1980s, working as a senior investment officer in 2 multi-billion-dollar family offices, and primarily launching and managing funds focused on small cap growth investments, both private and public. I first met Serina in 2020 and have been the CEO of Serina since the closing of our going public reverse merger transaction in March of 2024. Prior to the merger, I drove the process of finding a path to access the transformative capital required to further drive the clinical and commercial translation of what is extraordinary drug optimization technology. And we'll talk about that experience in the context of navigating what has been a very challenging environment for small biotech. The current sentiment is obviously very poor in the biotech market. There are 200 biotech companies roughly trading at negative enterprise values, and that means their market cap is less than their balance sheet cash. One might generally think that any business trading at a market cap below the cash on its balance sheet should be viewed as cheap. In biotech, that math does not apply because of the high negative operating cash flow burn rates that are a feature of drug development. But historically, when the number of negative EV companies hits these levels, the sentiment is pretty much on the floor, and the rebound is more a matter of when, not if. There's a well-known Wall Street saying relevant to what we're seeing 4+ years into this biotech bear market, and that saying goes a little something like this. There's no bell that rings at market bottoms. Sentiment is awful at bottoms, always, without exception. And the good news is that with biotech, when investor risk appetites expand, and they do, and they will again, often triggered by falling interest rates, the group can dramatically outperform, particularly coming out of a multi-year trough or hangover like we've experienced. There are very good reasons for the poor sentiment. Few of them outlined here really relate to the long period of low interest rates and low cost capital that's been available to the industry over an extended period. The takeaway message here is for CEOs and boards now is that companies have to be relentlessly focused on all the details on the front end because capital is not available otherwise. And for investors, the focus really should be on evidence-based, data-driven value inflection points. To practically frame what that means and frame our conversation today, it's my pleasure to introduce you to the Serina Therapeutics story. Over the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to lay out the case for why we think Serina can effectively navigate this challenging landscape and why that positions Serina as worthy of your investment consideration as you look at this sector, this beaten down sector. The breadth of our platform gives us a strong fundamental foundation to efficiently enable multiple assets to be developed across multiple drug modalities and therapeutic areas. Multiple shots on goal means diversification of risk. We're not a one and done binary event clinical company. We're not going to dive deep into the science underlying our platform on this call because we don't have the time for that. But at a high level, Serina has invented enabling technology based on the biocompatible polymer called poly-2-oxazoline. We call it POS for short, initially engineered as a new biocompatible polymer optimized for controlling small molecules. The technology is being advanced well beyond that initial value proposition to include optimized targeting potential in RNA and ADC therapeutics, perhaps two of the most active modalities in all of drug development. The overall message here is that being able to check these boxes gives us a real fighting chance to execute against Serina's ambitious vision of a multi-platform, multi-asset drug development company across therapeutic areas and drug modalities. It's a big vision that is easy to dismiss in an environment where capital is very expensive, if available at all. But that grand vision, reinforced by the components already in place, is what has attracted the accomplished folks around the table at Serina that we'll talk a little bit about. And we'll spend a minute or two on each of these messages and its relevance to handicapping the success of any biotech that you might be considering as an investment. I'll just go through them very briefly and tie them to where Serina is against this foundation. Clearly, investors need to know that the team has been there and done that before and created successful assets, companies, investments. And to do that, you really need to have a differentiated platform and pipeline with strong IP protection. You need a management team and board dynamics that are accretive to the mission and momentum organizationally. Strategic funding support is critical in an environment like this. A cap table dominated by passive investors is not a great position for a biotech today. High insider ownership, recent insider buying are sort of signals within the noise that are clearly understandable. Lead product candidate has to address a significant opportunity for anyone to care. And it has to have value. It has to be an end game to where the value can be recognized. Multiple shots on goal is a risk diversification input, and clearly data-driven, evidence-based milestones that are accretive to the intrinsic value of the business. You'd love to have those in the nearer term rather than the longer term. And of course, as capital efficient and accelerated regulatory pathway through the clinic to drug approval is a nice position to be in. So where does Serina stack up in terms of having those foundational pieces in place that give us a great chance of success? Scientific team invented the first generation of the drug delivery technology known as PEG when they were at their prior company, Shearwater Polymers. Shearwater successfully patented, manufactured, and partnered PEG technology in 11 approved drugs. Out of 23 programs that Shearwater was partnered with, 11 of them led to successful drugs. And 2 of them I've listed here were multi-billion-dollar, multi-decade franchise drugs for Amgen and Roche. The PEG platform became the standard delivery technology for proteins, biologic drugs, macromolecules, large molecules, leading to many, many successes. The Serina scientific founders took those learnings on the potential of biocompatible polymer technology into the small molecule space where PEG is not an optimal chemistry platform or technology platform, and it's created and invested millions in a robust, formidable patent estate that addresses composition of matter and foundational chemistry across multiple applications. So a very robust patent position is one of those checking the boxes. One of the easier signals to separate from all the noise in biotech investing are the pedigrees, accomplishments, networks of the people joining a project. In just the last 15 months, we've substantially remade the entire board with an incredible group of roll-up-your-sleeves contributors. I would point out specifically our 2 most recent additions to the board, Dr. Steve Brannon and Dr. Jay Katson, are prime examples of Team Serina's momentum. Steve's track record in neuroscience drug development is extraordinary. Most recently, he was the CMO at Serina Therapeutics, where he was employee number 2 and largely is responsible for the discovery and development for phase 3 of KarXT, the asset that drove the $14 billion acquisition by BMS, Bristol Myers Squibb, last year. Jay is a seasoned company builder and was the founding president of Alpine Immune Sciences, whose success in developing immunotherapies targeting autoimmune, inflammatory, and oncology diseases through innovative protein engineering led to Alpine's $4.9 billion acquisition last year by Vertex. Momentum in company building, like in competitive sports, is a very real thing. Much of the publicly traded small cap biotech universe is struggling to maintain organizational momentum, maintain talent, retain talent, because of both needing to shrink their organizations to address the capital challenges in today's market, or to try to maintain talent in the face of that talent having way below market, way underwater equity options. It is very difficult to rebuild institutional momentum from those depths, which much of the small cap biotech industry is experiencing. We are very fortunate that biotech investor Greg Bailey, going back to early 2023, aligned around our big vision for Serina and for our technology. Greg was an early backer of both Biohaven and Medivation, 2 companies acquired by Pfizer in the last 10 years for a combined value of $25 billion. Greg is still on the board at Biohaven, the stub company that remained public. They sold the mature assets of the company to Pfizer. Nurtec was the lead asset there. It's first in class, first line treatment for migraine headaches. Greg's platform company, his drug development and investment platform company, is called Juvenescence Limited, based out of London. They backed our going public merger transaction and continue to backstop our capital needs. Juvenescence CEO Richard Marshall is a Serina board member and a seasoned drug developer. having led major programs at AstraZeneca and GSK, and is an extraordinary resource for us in vetting potential product candidates. Of note is that Juvenescence recently announced an important strategic funding with M42 Health, the UAE sovereign-backed healthcare operating and investing platform company. The Emiratis and Saudis are investing billions in building an integrated life sciences infrastructure, and Juvenescence is positioned as a strategic partner in those efforts, with Serina well positioned to leverage our pole position in the Juvenescence portfolio. Another clear signal in the noise is the insider ownership, which is nearly 50%, and the recent insider buying led by our board members. We are a very closely held company with supportive insiders. Importantly, in this environment, we have a potential blockbuster lead asset that will enter a phase 1b clinical trial in 40 advanced Parkinson's patients in the fourth quarter of this year. Achieving best in class in this emerging market segment for Parkinson's, called continuous dopaminergic stimulation, translates into a $2 billion plus annual peak sales product in the US. Base case assumes very reasonable pricing, very reasonable market penetration. Upside case is a little more aggressive from there, but we believe that our target product profile is so differentiated from the standard of care available to these patients today that we have a very good chance of achieving first line best in class for our therapy. Our therapy is based on the molecule known as apomorphine. Apomorphine is a well-described molecule. It is a nasty molecule that is approved as a therapeutic and as a rescue therapy. So it is a clinically de-risked molecule. We know a lot about its safety and tolerability profile and where those serious adverse events are and what causes them. And we know a lot about its PK and its efficacy in advanced patients. Our technology allows apomorphine. It fulfills the promise of apomorphine as a product. Our technology dials out the onerous side effects of apomorphine in its current uses, and it makes the product much more convenient than apomorphine in its current form. The patient journey in Parkinson's inevitably leads to the orange box here, where the choices are not great. This is where we will enter the market, and we believe we have an opportunity to migrate engagement with patients earlier than this orange box, which would expand the market opportunity that I sized earlier in the previous slide. That box looks like this in terms of unmet need. About 180,000 to 200,000 patients just in the major markets of US, EU, UK, of patients whose symptoms are inadequately controlled. That means they are experiencing, if you go back to the journey chart, that narrowing wedge in the middle of this diagram is the deterioration of the quality of life of a Parkinson's patient. Fewer hours of on time as the disease progresses. Early on, the symptoms are well controlled and the patient experiences pretty good mobility and function, but that deteriorates at some point during the journey and oftentimes become more troublesome with symptoms like tremors, rigidity, slowness of movement, difficulty walking, and medications wearing off sooner. That's what those patients are experiencing in this population of 180,000, growing at 1% to 2% a year. The current products that address that unmet need are not great products. They have weaknesses. The patient is essentially wearing their care during their waking hours, goes off at night, has to be rescued in the morning, rinse and repeat. Onerous skin site reactions for all these products. In spite of all that, the analysts believe this is a $2 to $3 billion category, and we're going to be following in the wake of the marketing that these companies are already doing to this patient population with a differentiated, better product. We've dialed out the skin reactions common to those products and this is our target product profile. The patient has to wear this device for about 10 minutes once or twice a week, and they are always on. Our product is designed to keep the apomorphine circulating in the plasma, having an efficacious effect 24/7 once the patients are titrated to the right dose. So the clinical trial that we're running in advanced patients will be designed to tease out that dosing regimen that will keep a Parkinson's patient always on. That would be a paradigm shift in the care of these patients, and the KOLs in the space know our product and they're really excited about it. Summarize the lead asset: large unmet need, blockbuster potential. We're going into the clinic knowing the asset, knowing the molecule very, very well. So modest clinical risk, highly differentiated target product profile that meets an unmet need. We're going into advanced patients. This is a 1B trial. We're bringing 40 patients into a phase 1 unit for a week. So we'll have rich PK data to dial in this therapy, and we'll have relatively early key value inflection points in our clinical readouts. Importantly, because the molecule is already approved by FDA, we will be petitioning the agency in our upcoming IND meeting, pre-IND meeting, for our IND submission in the third quarter, a pathway called a 505(b)(2) NDA pathway, which is an accelerated pathway to an NDA, approved drug. And that means lower cost and shorter time to value commercial launch. And typically that pathway looks like a 1B trial and then a single pivotal 2B3 registrational trial that is powered to basically have an approved outcome. And so you're talking about, instead of the death march of 10 years from preclinical to NDA, a much briefer period. The chart that I showed earlier, the graph I showed earlier, assumes a commercial launch in 2030, which is a reasonable assumption, and that's what the argument we're going to be making with the agency. So what did we do next, right? So one of the inputs, the investor inputs, in terms of thinking about the risk-reward equation from your perspective, is this a binary shot on goal where if it fails, the company's done, or is there more? And at Serina, we are building much more. We're not going to talk on today's call about the other platform opportunities in those other drug modalities of RNA therapeutics and ADC therapeutics, but just in the pause small molecule space, we believe we can rinse and repeat the phenotype of SER-252 in CNS and other therapeutic areas. And our goal is to find other molecules where a long-acting, once-a-week injectable meets a unmet clinical need. And that can vary, but just checking the boxes in the bullets here, clinically de-risked molecules where we always want to start. That makes us eligible for a 505(b)(2) pathway and fewer dollars spent and less risk in the clinic, and a greater, an accelerated period of time to approvable NDA. Drugs with a narrow therapeutic index and window are clearly a target for us, and drugs that have failed due to poor PK or PK-related safety issues are another area where we think we can dial in efficacy and dial out safety concerns. Our goal, one of our 2025 corporate goals, is to add an additional small molecule or two into our pipeline that we can talk about the way we're talking about SER-252. Evidence-based, data-driven milestones is what investors are focused on in this environment. The nearer, the better. This is a layout of what we're looking at. Our pre-IND meeting is coming up real soon, and we hope to be treating dosing first patients in our 1B trial in the fourth quarter, and read out cohort 1 early in the second quarter of next year. So we'll know PK and some more. and we're headed with titration and dosing. So a lot of near-term milestones. The 505(b)(2) NDA pathway, visibility on that would be very accretive to intrinsic value. And then outside of the small molecule platform, we've got platform development activity happening as we advance those programs, both from a data standpoint and a prospective partnering standpoint. And that could give us access to non-dilutive capital, upfront license revenue, collaboration revenue. And so all of those things are happening, under the scenes with that team that I described earlier, adding enormous value to all of these efforts. And that really is the high level view of Serina, checking all these boxes. And I think we're ready for questions, John.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. Very interesting, and Serina's continues to make great progress here. Just a reminder, all you can choose to send in any questions right now. I'm going to go with the ones that have already been sent in, but just do it through the Zoom chat feature. I would ask if you're going to send anything in at this point forward. Well, here's one of the questions, and these are in no certain order. Could you speak to uh, how are recent regulatory trends and approval timelines impacting the pace of innovation and commercialization in biotech in general?
That's a webinar in itself, John. Given our new administration's view of science, we have not seen any changes at FDA with respect to neuroscience, regulatory, sort of engagement and the sort of the trusted timelines around engaging with FDA and the data that FDA needs to approve IND submissions, PDUFA dates kind of at the end of the road to getting an NDA approval, are slipping a little bit, but we don't have any significant concern around our specific programs, but generally, the idea that academia and institutions are losing funding, and so very talented research scientists can't advance their programs. Someone needs to step into the void, and I certainly believe that venture capital and private industry and corporate partners will do that. So it is really kind of a buyer's market for biotechs that have teams and capital to go partner and collaborate with academia with a lot of leverage to do pretty good transactions for our shareholders. So we're running aground all of those opportunities, there's a lot to talk about in that question, but I'll wrap it up there to get to some of your other ones.
Okay. Actually, this just popped up. It's interesting. It says Neuroderm got bought for $1 billion for phase 2 data on their program. Do you have any thoughts about that? Are you familiar with that? And or how does that play into your hand at Serina?
That is a great question. We know Neuroderm very, very well because they were a pioneer of using apomorphine as a therapy. And one of the assets that Mitsubishi Tanabe acquired in that acquisition was an apomorphine approach. Mitsubishi ultimately gave up on that formulation of apomorphine because they couldn't dial out the onerous skin reactions. But we've had numerous conversations with Oded Lieberman, who was the CEO of the company at the time, about our version of our product. And we certainly believe that if we get the readout that we're looking for on SER-252, our posylated version of apomorphine after our 1B trial, pharma and investors should consider that as equivalent to a phase 2 readout if we've gotten the 505(b)(2) NDA pathway, and that could be enormously accretive to value at Serina and lead to some interesting conversations around out licensing that asset, selling the asset outright, and perhaps big pharma putting a lens on our small molecule platform as something that they, like to get, a collaboration around. So yeah, it's a great question. It's a very relevant comp.
Okay, thank you. And follow up to that, it says, could you discuss the significance of your recent strategic partnerships, such as the licensing with Pfizer and the collaboration with Enable Injections for Serina's growth and innovation pipeline?
Yeah, I'll take the enable one first because that directly relates to SER 252, our extraordinary target product profile that we think will be first in class. Enable created a device that's insanely clever. I would encourage you to go to their website and take a look at that device. It is wearable technology that is all mechanical. There's no electronics in it other than the blue chip the Bluetooth chip in the device that alerts the clinician, physician, patient, caregiver to it's time to dose. The dose is done, and is just a adherence, compliance, monitoring tool. But everything else is very it's printed, it's 3D printed, it's snapped together in a factory, and they can make one every 7 seconds. So even though it looks like a complex device, it is a relatively low-cost disposable device that is very easy for the patient to use. Enable is an extraordinary company. They are well backed by a company called Magnetar Capital. And I encourage you to go look at Magnetar Capital's pedigree as an investor. It's very relevant to a company called CoreWeave that they backed, which is an AI leader. Very hot IPO, and the case study on how Magnetar helped CoreWeave achieve their success is relevant to Magnetar's backing of Enable. Enable had to do extensive due diligence on the commercial assessment of our SER-252 product because we asked them for an economic partnership that was outside the box of their typical deal with big pharma, and they had to believe that our indication, our product profile would sell millions of devices. And they had to believe that our posylation technology plus this device had the potential to have follow-on assets beyond SER-252. And I think we've satisfied that, and they're an important partner in building against our opportunity. Pfizer is a sort of a different deal in that there was a fear of missing out early in the mRNA rollout, mRNA vaccine rollouts in the COVID period, fear of missing out on next generation technology. And I think all of the folks involved in lipid nanoparticle delivered RNA, whether it's vaccine companies or other therapeutic areas and other modalities, understand that polyethylene glycol, PEG, is a liability in those formulations because of its immunogenicity. Serina invented a new biocompatible polymer called POS, and one of those reasons was because they knew PEG was highly immunogenic, and that would have repercussions clinically eventually. And so we know PEG very, very well. We know its liabilities, its strengths, and POS has been optimized to take advantage of our unique technology to dial out systemic immunogenicity to the polymer. So Pfizer and Serina embarked on a 2-year collaboration. Data, and after that data, they pulled the trigger on a non-exclusive license for a single target in a single field. For $3 million upfront and I think 3.5% royalty on the back end. And it was an easy deal for us to do because it was validation that we had a role to play in LNP delivered RNA therapeutics and vaccines. And we've subsequently evolved that technology from the version 1.0 that we licensed to Pfizer to a version 2.0 and ultimately working on a version 3.0 that adds targeting as an advantage to our technology versus just having an immune silent, formulation or delivery system. So, stay tuned on that area. Clearly what's happening with the RNA vaccines, it's not great. The COVID vaccines, feel like a kind of one and done, sort of one shot wonder right now, but because of this administration's position. But we certainly believe in them as a vaccine construct, and we're working with those players. But we think some other areas are much more exciting, like gene editing and personalized cancer vaccines.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Here's a here's a follow up to that. Could this technology be used to make a better Krystexxa, which sold for 1.2 billion last year?
I don't know that asset specifically. If it's a small molecule and has the right chemical handle, then we have several mechanisms to posylate that molecule. I'd have to look at it. The our chemistry team would have to look at it. We'd have to do a commercial assessment of whether a once a week sub-Q injection would meet a significant unmet need. But we have in our Boil the Ocean sort of pipeline discovery project a lot of molecules, and it may very well be in there. I'm just not current on that.
Yeah, apparently the follow-up message I got is it is a pegylated molecule.
Yeah, I mean that is a whole other area. That's almost another company to go after the current pegylated molecules and see if POS, would provide clinical benefit, right? And it's not an area that we're looking at it's another ocean to boil, right? In terms of what pegylated products would be better as posylated products. I mean, we only have a very limited number of team members and capital, but it is something we would run to ground with the right resources to see if there's a pipeline opportunity there.
Okay, thank you. Um, Here's more of a general question. What key patterns or indicators should investors watch for that may signal a turnaround in the biotech sector?
You cut out on the first part of that question, Ron.
Oh,
Can you just
I'm sorry.
repeat?
So what key patterns or indicators should investors watch for that may signal a turnaround in the biotech sector?
I mean, it's some of the higher level anecdotal signals are increased M&A activity, right? If big pharma is a buyer of these assets, then the end game is sort of back on, right? There's just been a backing up of M&A activity, exits, IPOs. So venture capital GPs have portfolios where they would have expected to exit by now, and their LPs would have expected to have distributions. And so the whole funding chain has just been backed up. And so that front end of acquisition activity, the sort of a slow reopening of the IPO window and starting to see those sort of transactions is a leading indicator. And then, there are, all the way down to very granular technical indicators of, increasing price volume momentum in the various subsectors of biotech.
Got it. Thank you. Back to Serina, it's regards to funding and your existing cash balance and where that might take you. How do you see, and tying into that is, what is your long-term vision for Serina and the broad, as the market stabilize?
Great question. We are very fortunate to be backed by Greg Bailey and Juvenescence as a key strategic asset in their portfolio and their vision. So we don't have to, we're not forced to go bolt on 2 to 3 years worth of capital and runway, which is what most institutional investors need in this environment, and bolt that capital on in a very difficult, expensive market for capital where transactions, we could do 30, 40, $50 million fundings today with 150% warrant coverage or at a deep discount to market. That's the cost of capital in this market. Fortunately, we don't have to do that. And we can kind of thread the needle on moving the company forward against these milestones that I laid out, which should be accretive to the intrinsic value or the pre-money value doing that re-IPO or that real funding of the company. But in the meantime, we've got the capital to get the asset into the clinic, the lead asset into the clinic, and various strategies to bolt on capital, to keep this thing moving forward. And clearly the support of our lead investor is one of those avenues. But yeah, looking at Serina, on the surface, looking at the Q filings and seeing our cash balance and our burn rate of about $4.5 million a quarter, it's not a particularly comforting, view. The company will need to be financed. And so investors should be focused on all of these biotechs that need to be financed. What's the cost of that capital going to be? And is it going to dilute me? And should I wait until after that funding? And, fortunately, we don't have to, bite that bullet on a massively dilutive financing in this environment and have a strategy to navigate our way out of it and to a lower cost of capital to aggressively go on offense.
Okay, thanks, Steve. And lastly, as far as the next, call it 6 to 12 months, what is the key milestones that you lay out? You spoke to them before, but could you just just review those for us?
Yeah, I'll put up the slide again. And on the product, development side, and data associated with that, we've got our IND submission coming up, and a pre-IND meeting that previews that. And as part of that conversation with the agency, we will be making our case for an accelerated regulatory pathway, that 505(b)(2) NDA pathway. That go ahead, if you will, of our IND filing and visibility on that pathway are important news events that are happening in the very near term. Beyond that, first patient in is a nice milestone to be focused on, and it means that we've activated sites and we're executing the clinical operations on the timeline we laid out. And we've got a terrific team in ClinOps and extraordinary regulatory resources around advising and helping us put together the 505(b)(2) argument with the agency. And then, once we get into the clinic and start enrolling patients, we'll have, sort of regular readouts, and we'll decide internally what we want to disclose publicly. But I think the timeline here looks realistic. And I, as an investor, I would watch for news on new pause small molecule conjugate. If we can add another IND candidate to our pipeline and initiate those studies and be on a track to the clinic, within, say, a 12-month time frame, and it's an asset that is a blockbuster asset, and it could track a 505(b)(2) NDA pathway, we think that would be very nicely accretive to the intrinsic value of the company. So that's a key milestone that I would look for as investors, and certainly someone like Steve Brandon with his background didn't sign up to Serina, the Serina project, because he thinks all there's here is pause apomorphine. And Steve's a drug developer extraordinaire in neuropsych and neuroscience. And if you think about our target product profile, essentially, once a week injectable versus, let's say, a twice or 3 times a day oral, you think about some of the indications where that would be a very nice asset to have, or a solution to have for clinicians in areas like schizophrenia, where adherence and compliance is critically important to success. And so, stay tuned on, where we're going with our positive small molecule pipeline.
Okay, will do. And then one last question on this on the stock side is, are you currently covered by any investment banking analysts, and do they have a price target, or buy on you, or where do they stand?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's one of the questions that, I think investors should always ask is kind of, where is the investor demand going to come from? Essentially, where is the company in the institutional discovery process? And companies with strong fundamental prospects that are undiscovered with little to no research or institutional sponsorship are typically pretty good places to start your research in finding out performers. We're only covered by Jones Research. They initiated coverage, I think, in maybe it was March or April. It's fairly recent, and they've got a 50-page report. It's a good report. It's very comprehensive. It puts a nice price target on a company, not even assuming an accelerated 505(b)(2) NDA pathway in their NPV model on the lead asset. And obviously, part of what I do with my time is to, communicate with analysts and bankers and work that traditional IR approach. But we're also doing some really creative things on the R side to try to connect our story with retail, high net worth family office investors that you'll sort of be seeing the collateral from those campaigns pretty soon.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Steve. I appreciate, you taking the time to get us up to date on the industry and the biotech industry, and as well as Serina Therapeutics. Again, the symbol for Serina is NY on the NYSE is SER. Look forward to having you back on the program as you make progress. And wanted to thank all that attended today, and remind you that if you want to see Steve across, to possibly see him at one of a live event and learn even more, let us know through the wish list process at the website, or just ping me. And I'd be happy to try to make that happen in your tribe city. Again, thank you for your attention today. Thank you, Serina. Thank you, Stephen. And thank you all of the tribe for joining us. And know that the video of this event will be published at the Tribe Public YouTube channels as soon as possible later today. And again, thank you for your attention and time.
Thanks, John. Thanks, everybody.